What if the most feared movie rating in Hollywood actually created better films? During the 70s and 80s, an X could destroy advertising, block theater bookings, and scare away distributors. Decades later, many of those supposed cinematic outcasts are remembered more clearly than the safe studio hits that once defeated them. Before we begin, like this video, share it with another movie fan, and subscribe to the channel. Number 20. Flesh Gordon, 1974. Imagine taking a clean-cut space serial, replacing its heroic dignity with cheap jokes, and then constructing an entire galaxy around deliberate bad taste. That was the strange mission behind Flesh Gordon, an independent parody that originally received an X rating before being edited into an R-rated theatrical version. The story follows Flesh Gordon, Dale Arter, and the brilliantly named scientist, Dr. Flexi Jerkoff, as they travel to the planet Porno. Its ruler, Emperor Wang, has aimed a powerful ray toward Earth, causing the population to lose control of its behavior. Flesh and his companions must survive hostile guards, bizarre creatures, and handmade spaceships while trying to stop the Emperor. Its most memorable moments are not remembered for polish. They are remembered for gloriously homemade visual effects. Stop-motion monsters, miniature spacecraft, painted sets, and intentionally ridiculous costumes make the film resemble an expensive school play created by extremely imaginative adults. What could have disappeared as a one-joke production instead attracted science fiction collectors, midnight movie audiences, and fans of practical effects. Viewers began admiring the amount of craft hidden beneath the silliness. It was crude, uneven, and proudly ridiculous, but it understood that parody works best when the filmmakers secretly love the material they are mocking. Number 19. The Opening of Misty Beethoven, 1976. Behind the adult classification was a surprisingly traditional comedy structure borrowed from Pygmalion and My Fair Lady. Instead of transforming a flower seller into a society lady, the film follows an arrogant specialist who believes he can remake an inexperienced woman into a sophisticated international personality. Misty is discovered in New York by Dr. Seymour Love, who treats romance like a scientific competition. He begins giving her lessons in speech, clothing, confidence, etiquette, and social performance. His goal is to present her at an exclusive gathering and prove that his teaching methods can create the perfect companion. The movie's famous sequences involve the elaborate training process and its movement between New York, Paris, and Rome. Unlike cheaply produced competitors, it used real locations, careful lighting, costume changes, comedy, and an actual character arc. Misty gradually stops behaving like a student and begins controlling the experiment herself. That reversal is the reason the movie retained a following. Audiences returned not simply because it was forbidden, but because it had wit, visual ambition, and a central character who outgrew the man attempting to manufacture her identity. What began as an adult-era novelty became a time capsule of the brief moment when such filmmakers believed they might compete with mainstream cinema on storytelling and production value. Number 18. Behind the Green Door, 1972. Mystery, rather than plot, drives this peculiar San Francisco production. A woman named Gloria Saunders is taken to a private club where an unseen audience waits for a highly theatrical presentation behind a green door. Very little conventional dialogue explains who organized the event or why Gloria was selected. Instead, the filmmakers create a dreamlike atmosphere through colored lighting, slow movement, music, masks, and increasingly abstract imagery. The most famous section transforms the screen into a psychedelic performance, with colors changing across faces and bodies until the scene feels closer to experimental theater than ordinary narrative cinema. Marilyn Chambers became the film's instantly recognizable star. Her appearance generated additional attention because she had previously been associated with a wholesome advertising image. That contrast helped turn the production into a cultural scandal rather than just another restricted release. The film became one of the first adult features to receive wide American distribution, and its success brought obscenity cases, newspaper arguments, and mainstream curiosity. Modern viewers may find its pace slow, but that unusual slowness is central to its reputation. It feels ceremonial and strange, almost as though the filmmakers were attempting to create an underground art film while accidentally producing one of the era's most famous commercial controversies. Number 17. Deep Throat, 1972. Few low-budget productions have caused this much legal trouble, public curiosity, and cultural confusion. The basic story follows Linda, a woman who believes something is missing from her romantic life. A doctor offers an absurd anatomical explanation, turning her problem into the film's central joke and launching a series of comic encounters. Its most famous sequence is the examination in which the doctor delivers his impossible diagnosis with complete seriousness. Bells, rockets, and other exaggerated visual metaphors are then used as punchlines. That playful tone separated the movie from material that had no characters or recognizable story structure. The filmmaking was technically rough, yet audiences lined up. Mainstream celebrities reportedly attended screenings. Newspapers discussed it, and the phrase "porno chic" was used to describe fashionable interest in adult cinema. Court cases and attempts to ban the film only increased public demand. Its reported earnings have been heavily disputed, and exaggerated figures became part of its legend. What is certain is that the movie escaped its original market and became a national argument about censorship, private viewing, artistic freedom, and changing social behavior. Its legacy is also darker and more complicated because Linda Lovelace later described painful experiences surrounding her participation. That history prevents the film from being remembered as harmless rebellion. It remains famous, but its cult status now carries serious questions about power, exploitation, and what audiences were not told. If you enjoy forgotten movie history without the usual Hollywood sugarcoating, subscribe now. Like and share the video so more classic film fans can join the countdown. Number 16. Emmanuelle, 1974. Instead of looking cheap or secretive, this French production presented adult material through soft lighting, glamorous travel, expensive interiors, and the relaxed atmosphere of a luxury vacation. That visual elegance helped it reach viewers who would never have entered a traditional adult theater. The story begins as Emmanuelle travels to Bangkok to join her diplomat husband Jean. She enters a wealthy social world where conventional marriage rules appear flexible, and everyone seems to be testing a different philosophy of personal freedom. Curious but inexperienced, she begins exploring this environment while trying to decide which choices genuinely belong to her. One of the most recognizable images is not an intimate scene at all. It is Sylvia Kristel, seated in a large wicker chair, an image that became inseparable from the film's advertising. The opening airplane journey also establishes its dreamy tone, presenting travel as the beginning of a transformation. The movie was criticized for disguising exploitation beneath beautiful photography, yet that polished surface was exactly what gave it unusual cultural reach. It played internationally for years, inspired many sequels and imitations, and turned Kristel into a global symbol of 70s European cinema. Number 15. Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, 1971. Long before independent filmmaking became a fashionable marketing phrase, Melvin Van Peebles made a movie outside the Hollywood system and used controversy as part of its identity. Advertisements declared that it had been rated X by an all-white jury, although the classification was largely self-imposed during its original release. Sweetback begins as a performer in an adult stage show. After witnessing police officers abusing a young black activist, he attacks the officers and becomes a fugitive. The rest of the film follows his desperate movement through Los Angeles, as police, informants, and authority figures attempt to trap him. Its most powerful sequences show Sweetback running. He crosses streets, empty land, industrial spaces, and finally the border, while an energetic soundtrack by Earth, Wind & Fire pushes the movie forward. The rough editing, split screens, sudden color changes, and handheld photography make the experience feel immediate and unstable. This was not a polished studio fantasy about a comfortable hero. It was angry, confrontational, and designed for an audience Hollywood often ignored. The ending refuses punishment and promises that Sweetback will return, giving viewers a victory that mainstream American films rarely permitted black characters to achieve. Its success helped open the market for the blaxploitation cycle, though critics debated its politics and representation. Whatever position viewers take, its independent production, aggressive style, and refusal to request permission made it a genuine cult landmark. Number 14. Pink Flamingos, 1972. Nothing about John Waters' underground comedy asks for respectability. It attacks good taste so aggressively that being offended almost becomes part of the admission price. Divine plays Babs Johnson, an underground celebrity hiding in a trailer with her eccentric family. She has been publicly labeled the filthiest person alive, a title that attracts the jealousy of Connie and Raymond Marble. The rival couple runs illegal schemes and believes they deserve Babs' crown. Their competition grows into sabotage, humiliation, tabloid spectacle, and criminal revenge. Several scenes became infamous, but the lasting image is Divine's fearless performance, wearing extreme makeup, fitted dresses, and an expression of complete confidence. She turns Babs into a strange outlaw queen. The final scene was designed to make audiences question whether the filmmakers had any limit at all. Describing it is unnecessary. Anyone familiar with midnight cinema already knows why it remains notorious. Pink Flamingos was released without an ordinary MPA rating rather than receiving a conventional Studio X. However, it existed in the same restricted underground world and was later classified NC-17 for a re-release. Midnight screenings transformed it from a Baltimore oddity into a communal challenge. Audiences brought friends simply to watch their reactions. Beneath the Shock is a celebration of outsiders who refuse society's demand to become normal. That rebellious spirit made Divine an icon and turned cheap production into permanent cult mythology. Number 13. Fritz the Cat, 1972. Animation was supposed to be safe, colorful entertainment for children. Ralph Bakshi looked at that assumption and decided to destroy it with one feature. Fritz is a selfish, restless college-age cat wandering through a distorted version of New York. He wants excitement, artistic importance, romance, and political credibility, but he rarely understands the movements or people he attempts to join. His journey takes him from student gatherings to Harlem unrest, motorcycle rebels, street violence, and revolutionary chaos. The opening bathtub party announced immediately that this was not a family cartoon. Yet the most important sequences are the street scenes, where Bakshi mixed exaggerated animal characters with dialogue inspired by recordings of real New Yorkers. Watercolor backgrounds, graffiti, smoke, crowded apartments, and overheard conversations gave the cartoon a dirty realism. The MPA awarded it an X rating, and its distributor advertised it as the first X-rated full-length animated feature. That label caused trouble, but it also gave the film an identity no expensive campaign could have invented. It became commercially successful and proved that feature animation could address adult politics, race, hypocrisy, urban alienation, and counterculture confusion. Some of its stereotypes have aged badly, and its satire is often reckless. Even so, later adult animation owes it a debt. Fritz kicked open a door, caused a scandal, and left every future animator free to walk through the wreckage. Number 12. The Devils, 1971. Religious authority, political ambition, jealousy, and public hysteria collide in Ken Russell's historical nightmare. The result was so provocative that different versions have circulated for decades, while missing footage has become almost as famous as the released film. Father Urbain Grandier is a charismatic priest protecting the French city of Loudun from outside political control. Sister Jeanne, the leader of a convent, develops an obsession with him. When Grandier rejects her imagined relationship, private frustration becomes a public accusation. Officials seeking control of Loudun exploit the claim, presenting ordinary desire and political resistance as evidence of witchcraft. The most famous sequences occur during the staged exorcisms. Crowds gather, officials perform for public attention, and religion becomes theater. Russell surrounds the characters with Derek Jarman's enormous white sets, creating a world that feels both historical and disturbingly modern. Oliver Reed plays Grandier, with arrogance and dignity, while Vanessa Redgrave makes Sister Jean frightening, vulnerable, manipulative, and tragic at the same time. The final punishment of Grandier is difficult, not because the camera celebrates suffering, but because the audience understands that the verdict was decided before the trial began. The BFLC granted a cut version an X certificate, while the American release also faced an X before further editing secured an R. Its reputation survived every cut. For cult audiences, the missing material represents more than forbidden imagery. It symbolizes the fear institutions often show when art exposes how institutions manufacture fear. Number 11. In the Realm of the Senses, 1976. An obsessive relationship becomes its own sealed universe. In Nagisa Oshima's controversial drama, everything outside the central couple gradually loses importance. Employment, politics, social expectations, personal safety, and finally ordinary reality itself. Set in 1930s Japan and inspired by the Sada Abe case, the story follows hotel worker Sada and her employer, Kichizo. Their attraction becomes an all-consuming affair. They retreat into rented rooms and begin treating separation as unbearable. What begins with pleasure slowly becomes a competition in devotion, possession, and control. The most memorable scenes show the outside world continuing without them. Soldiers march through the streets, social rules remain in force, and Imperial Japan moves toward conflict. Yet Sada and Kichizo barely notice. Their room becomes both sanctuary and prison. Oshima did not present the relationship as glamorous romance. He filmed it as a political refusal of respectable society, but also as a warning about desire stripped of boundaries. The final act is tragic, disturbing, and inevitable, because the characters have rejected every possible exit. Censors around the world struggled with the film. The BFFC considered that enormous cuts would be necessary for an X certificate, while other territories banned or restricted it. It nevertheless entered serious film culture through festivals, criticism, restorations, and academic study. Its cult reputation comes from that contradiction. It is explicit but controlled, beautiful but frightening, intimate but emotionally cold. Viewers may reject it, admire it, or feel deeply uncomfortable, yet few forget the suffocating world Oshima creates. Number 10. Dawn of the Dead, 1978. At first, a shopping mall appears to be the safest place left in America. It contains food, clothing, tools, furniture, entertainment, and locked doors. George Romero gradually reveals that it is also a brightly lit trap. The collapse begins inside a television studio, where experts argue while the dead return to life outside. Traffic reporter Stephen and producer Francine escape by helicopter with police officers Roger and Peter. After several dangerous stops, the group discovers a suburban mall and decides to claim it as a private fortress. What follows is one of horror cinema's greatest false victories. The survivors block the entrances, remove the wandering dead, collect supplies, eat restaurant food, play arcade games, and fill an apartment with furniture. For a brief period, the end of civilization resembles an endless shopping holiday. The famous montage of the group enjoying the mall is funny, but it also explains the film's satire. Even after death, the former shoppers return because the location was important to them. Consumer habit has become stronger than memory. Security eventually creates boredom, jealousy, and overconfidence. Then a motorcycle gang crashes into the building, opening the protected world to chaos. The mall becomes a battlefield between people fighting over objects that no longer matter. Romero released the picture unrated in the United States, rather than cutting it for an R. A shortened version titled Zombies, Dawn of the Dead, received a Cut X certificate for British cinemas. That difficult history helped different edits become collector's items. Cult viewers returned for the practical makeup, goblin music, social satire, and Ken Foree's commanding performance. More importantly, they returned because the movie asks a painful question. If the world ended tomorrow, would people build something new, or would they simply lock themselves inside the remains of the old world? Number 9. The Evil Dead, 1981. 5 young friends, 1 isolated cabin, and 1 terrible recording were enough to launch the careers of Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, and one of horror cinema's most durable franchises. Ash, Linda, Cheryl, Scotty, and Shelley arrive at a remote cabin for a quiet vacation. In the cellar, they discover an old book, a ceremonial dagger, and tape translations made by a previous visitor. When the recording is played, an ancient force awakens in the surrounding woods. The story is simple, but the filmmaking is wildly inventive. Raimi could not afford expensive studio equipment, so the crew created homemade camera rigs and rushed them through the forest. The audience seems to become the approaching force, racing between trees and directly toward the cabin. One famous sequence places Cheryl beneath the trapdoor, as the others struggle to understand whether she is still human. Another transforms ordinary household objects into sources of terror. The cabin's windows, clock, basement, floorboards, and even light bulbs appear to be alive and laughing at Ash. Bruce Campbell does not begin as an unstoppable hero. His fear, hesitation, and confusion make the nightmare more effective. Only after the others fall does he become the figure later audiences would recognize. The B-Fall FC passed the theatrical version, with small cuts and an X certificate during the final year that classification was used. Its later home video history became central to Britain's video nasty controversy, increasing its forbidden reputation. Midnight screenings and videotape circulation allowed fans to study every camera trick, continuity mistake, handmade effect, and drop of theatrical fluid. What authorities treated as dangerous, horror fans recognized as energetic independent filmmaking. Its cult grew because viewers could feel the young crew inventing solutions in real time. Number 8. My Bloody Valentine. 1971. A small mining town attempts to revive a Valentine's Day celebration 20 years after an accident turned the holiday into a local nightmare. The decision immediately brings warnings that some traditions are better left buried. Years earlier, supervisors abandoned their posts to attend a dance, leaving miners underground. An explosion trapped the workers, and only Harry Warden survived. After being rescued, he punished those he blamed and warned the town never to hold another Valentine's event. When young residents finally decide the legend is old history, heart-shaped candy boxes begin arriving with threatening messages. A figure in mining equipment appears in tunnels, storage rooms, and abandoned sections of the mine. Because nearly every local man owns similar gear, the mask hides both identity and motive. The film's strongest setting is the mine itself. Narrow passages, hanging lights, elevators, machinery, and darkness create tension without requiring an enormous budget. During the final chase, the characters are trapped beneath the town, while old romantic rivalries and family secrets come to the surface. The original production was forced to remove material after repeated ratings trouble. Even after cuts had been made, the Empire reportedly returned the film with an X and demanded further reductions before an R was granted. For years, viewers knew important moments only through still photographs and rumors. That absence created a collector's obsession. When restored footage finally appeared, fans could compare the censored theatrical release with the filmmaker's intended version. Number 7. Angel Heart, 1987. A missing person investigation slowly transforms into a supernatural confession in Alan Parker's mixture of detective noir, Southern Gothic horror, and psychological mystery. Harry Angel is a private investigator hired by the elegant and unsettling Louis Cypher. His assignment appears simple: locate Johnny Favorite, a popular singer who disappeared after returning injured from the Second World War. Cypher claims Favorite owes him a debt. Harry follows hospital records, former doctors, musicians, fortune tellers, and old acquaintances. Each witness provides another piece of Johnny's past, but several die soon after speaking with him. The investigation moves from cold New York streets to humid New Orleans, where religious rituals, jazz clubs, decaying buildings, and Harry's own nightmares begin merging together. Robert De Niro makes Louis Cypher memorable through stillness. In the famous restaurant scene, he calmly removes the shell from a boiled egg while asking Harry questions. The action seems harmless, yet Parker films it like a threat. Mickey Rourke gives Harry a nervous physical presence. He is always sweating, smoking, washing his hands, or insisting that he dislikes chickens. Those repeated details eventually become clues. The elevator descending at the end, visually completes Harry's journey. By then, he understands that he has not been chasing another man. He has been circling a truth about himself that Cypher already knows. The film initially received an X rating, largely because of one controversial sequence. Parker made small reductions to secure an R, and critics later argued that the earlier classification had been unnecessarily harsh. Number 6. RoboCop, 1987. Beneath the metal armor, exploding vehicles, corporate slogans, and dark comedy is a surprisingly emotional story about a murdered man recovering pieces of his identity. Detroit police officer Alex Murphy is transferred into a dangerous district where officers lack equipment and public institutions are collapsing. During an attempt to arrest criminal leader Clarence Boddicker, Murphy is critically wounded. The corporation controlling the police department uses what remains of him to create RoboCop, a heavily armed machine programmed to enforce the law. At first, the company treats Murphy as property. Executives erase his name, hide his history, and present him at a press conference like a new household appliance. However, fragments of memory return. He dreams of his family, visits his abandoned home, and recognizes one of the men responsible for his death. The boardroom demonstration of ED-209 is among the most famous scenes. A corporate security machine malfunctions during a presentation, while executives remain concerned with liability and market potential. Violence and business language collide, revealing the film's true target, a system capable of turning any tragedy into a product. Another unforgettable moment occurs when RoboCop catches a criminal in a convenience store. The criminal recognizes Murphy from the past, causing the supposedly emotionless machine to hesitate. The MIPA initially awarded the film an X because of its violence. Orion resubmitted it several times, trimming moments until an R was granted. The restored version later became widely available, allowing audiences to see how the exaggeration strengthens the satire rather than making it realistic. Peter Weller's controlled movement, Basil Polidorus' heroic music, and Paul Verhoeven's fake television advertisements created a complete world. News programs casually report international disaster before selling viewers a ridiculous product. Number 5. Scarface, 1983. Tony Montana arrives in America with nothing except ambition, anger, and the belief that wealth can erase humiliation. 3 hours later, he owns a mansion, a criminal empire, and nearly every object he once desired. He has also destroyed every relationship that could have made any of it meaningful. After leaving a refugee camp, Tony and his friend Manny begin working for Miami traffickers. Tony's fearlessness attracts the attention of Frank Lopez, an established businessman who values profit but understands limits. Tony views caution as weakness. He wants Frank's money, power, home, and girlfriend, Elvira. The hotel sequence involving a failed deal announces the brutal world Tony is entering. Yet the push-it-to-the-limit montage may be more important. Money moves through counting machines, luxury cars appear, businesses expand, and Tony marries Elvira. The American dream seems to have been achieved through pure speed. Then the mansion becomes a prison. Tony watches security cameras, argues with Elvira, distrusts Manny, and sits alone before a desk covered with evidence of his own dependency. The world belongs to him, but no one in that world truly loves or trusts him. The final attack turns his mansion into a collapsing monument. Tony refuses to surrender and continues announcing his power even as his organization disappears around him. His fall beneath a statue reading, "The world is yours," completes the film's cruel joke. The MPA repeatedly challenged the picture, and the filmmakers faced an X before appealing for an R. Director Brian De Palma argued that cuts would not meaningfully change the content. The theatrical version was ultimately approved, though controversy became central to its marketing. Initial reviews were divided, with some critics finding the movie excessive and exhausting. Later audiences embraced exactly those qualities. Hip-hop artists quoted Tony, posters covered bedroom walls, games borrowed its imagery, and fans transformed its dialogue into motivational language. Number 4. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, 1986. Most screen criminals are surrounded by dramatic music, clever detectives, and explanations that create a safe distance between the audience and the character. John McNaughton removes that distance. His film presents cruelty as something that can exist inside an ordinary apartment, behind an unremarkable face. Henry lives in Chicago with Otis, a former prison acquaintance. Otis's sister Becky arrives after leaving a difficult marriage and begins trusting Henry. She sees him as quiet, protective, and different from her brother. The audience, however, has already seen evidence of his secret life. Michael Rooker plays Henry without theatrical madness. He speaks calmly, invents contradictory stories about his past, and treats terrible behavior as routine. That emotional emptiness disturbed the Mempa more than isolated images. The ratings board reportedly argued that no simple cuts could change the film's nihilistic tone. The most discussed sequence involves Henry and Otis recording an invasion and later watching the tape from their sofa. McNaughton creates two levels of spectatorship. The characters watch their recording, while the cinema audience watches them. The scene denies the usual excitement of horror, and instead creates shame, distance, and discomfort. Becky believes she has finally found someone who will protect her from Otis. Henry's actions encourage that hope, making the conclusion more devastating. His capacity for apparent kindness does not redeem him. It makes him harder to understand. The production was completed on a tiny budget and premiered at the Chicago International Film Festival, but distribution stalled. The Mempa insisted on an X, limiting advertising and theater bookings. It was eventually released unrated, years after filming. Number 3. Caligula, 1979. This production had prestigious actors, enormous sets, a famous historical subject, and a screenplay connected to respected writer Gore Vidal. It also became one of the most chaotic, disputed, and notorious movies ever released. The story follows the rise and fall of Roman Emperor Caligula, played by Malcolm McDowell. As the elderly Tiberius approaches death, Caligula studies the cruelty and corruption of imperial power. Once he becomes emperor, he initially promises change, but soon turns government into an extension of personal appetite, insecurity, and revenge. Peter O'Toole plays Tiberius as a decaying ruler surrounded by fear. John Gielgud brings dignity to the doomed Senator Nerva, while Helen Mirren portrays Caligula's politically aware wife, Caesonia. Their respected performances exist beside scenes added or altered during a production battle over control. The giant imperial ship is one of the film's most memorable images. Built on an enormous soundstage, it represents the production itself. Expensive, impressive, excessive, and almost impossible to control. Another famous sequence shows Caligula humiliating the Senate, forcing powerful men to participate in his performance of absolute authority. Director Tinto Brass was dismissed before editing was completed. Vidal rejected the finished work, while producer Bob Guccione added material without the principal actor's participation. The result feels like several incompatible films fighting inside one running time. Historical drama, political satire, exploitation spectacle, and lavish costume epic. Rather than submit the complete version to the Mempa, the distributors released it without an official rating. Guccione acknowledged that it would have received an X. Authorities seized prints in some cities. Protests closed screenings, and legal cases debated whether the film possessed serious political or historical value. For years, different edits appeared around the world. Some emphasized the Roman drama, others emphasized the scandal. Collectors compared running times, missing scenes, alternate dialogue, and damaged prints. Number 2. Last Tango in Paris, 1972. An empty apartment becomes a hiding place for two strangers who believe they can create a relationship without names, histories, responsibilities, or consequences. Paul is an American living in Paris, whose wife has recently died by suicide. Emotionally shattered, he enters an apartment that is available to rent and meets Jeanne, a young woman also inspecting it. Their first encounter begins an anonymous affair. Paul insists they reveal nothing about themselves outside the room. Jeanne returns to a very different life. Her fiancé Tom is a young filmmaker who constantly records her, turning their relationship into a documentary about their coming marriage. Paul returns to the small hotel once managed by his wife, where he confronts her belongings, employees, family, and unanswered secrets. Inside the apartment, Paul attempts to transform grief into control. He rejects names because names would make the relationship real. Yet his pain enters every conversation. Marlon Brando's long speech beside his wife's body is among his most exposed performances. The character shifts between anger, comedy, childishness, cruelty, and complete emotional collapse. The most controversial apartment scene involves sexual assault and has become inseparable from later discussions of the production. Maria Schneider subsequently spoke about feeling humiliated and insufficiently informed about how the scene would be approached. That testimony changed how modern audiences and critics discuss the film, its director, and the difference between depicting exploitation and creating an exploitative working environment. After Paul finally reveals his identity, he imagines that the relationship can continue in ordinary life. Jean sees him differently outside their private space. The famous Tango Hall sequence shows older couples dancing while Paul behaves desperately, attempting to turn temporary escape into permanent romance. The story ends in Jean's family apartment, where Paul follows her despite her repeated rejection. His final attempt to charm her cannot undo the fear and damage he has created. The film received an X rating in the United States and an X certificate in Britain, initially with a small cut. In 1978, the BBC allowed the British version to play uncut under the same adult classification. Number 1. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Stanley Kubrick's futuristic nightmare was condemned as dangerous, praised as brilliant, withdrawn from British cinemas, edited for a lower American rating, and studied for decades. Few X-rated films traveled so completely from scandal to established classic. Alex is a young gang leader living in a near-future Britain, filled with decaying public housing, strange fashion, political failure, and stylized advertising. He loves classical music, particularly Beethoven, but also enjoys domination, theft, and violence. His intelligence and taste do not make him civilized. They simply give him a more sophisticated way to describe his cruelty. After his companions turn against him, Alex is arrested and imprisoned. He volunteers for the Ludovico technique, an experimental treatment promoted by the government as a solution to crime. Doctors restrain him in a chair, hold his eyes open, and force him to watch violent images while medication creates overwhelming sickness. Released into society, Alex meets people he once harmed. His former friends now wear police uniforms, allowing them to continue abusing power with official approval. A writer who unknowingly shelters him eventually recognizes Alex's identity and uses him as a weapon against the government. Kubrick fills the film with contradictions. Horrible behavior is accompanied by beautiful music. Modern buildings resemble prisons. Authority figures condemn Alex while using manipulation, torture, and publicity for their own benefit. The viewer is pushed into disliking Alex, then made uncomfortable when institutions become even more controlling than he was. In Britain, reports connected real crimes to the movie. Kubrick eventually withdrew it from British circulation, and legal screenings did not return during his lifetime. The absence made the film more mysterious. Bootleg tapes, imported copies, newspaper stories, and arguments kept it culturally alive. Yet imitation often removes the moral argument. Alex's appearance is easy to reproduce. The film's questions are harder. Can a government create goodness through force? Is a person without free choice still human? Does society oppose violence, or does it merely want exclusive control over violence? The ending offers no comforting answer. Alex becomes useful to politicians, who restore his freedom in exchange for public cooperation. He imagines returning to his old behavior while respectable observers applaud. Neither medicine, prison, religion, nor politics has made him good. Each institution has simply attempted to use him. These movies were censored, cut, banned, protested, and pushed away from ordinary theaters. Yet controversy could not erase them. Some are artistic landmarks, some are fascinating disasters, and others remain deeply complicated. Which entry surprised you most, And which movie would you place at number 1? Share your choice below, like the video, and subscribe for more forgotten stories from cinema's wildest decades.